Aloha and good morning. I'm Kirsten Baumgart Turner, host for Sustainable Hawaii. This is a part of the educational series on ThinkTech Hawaii. And last week I talked with my guests about greenhouse gases, their impacts on Hawaii, and the President's Power Plan. And this week we're going to dive deeper into sustainability issues and discuss the faith perspectives and indigenous perspectives of sustainability in Hawaii. I have with me our guest today, Chuck Burrows, Dr. Chuck Burrows, who is a highly acclaimed conservationist in Hawaii. Chuck is well known for his work for nearly 4 decades on preserving Kauai Nui Marsh. As a matter of fact, the Honolulu Advertiser, I think, called you the Lord of the Marsh at one time. And that's what people know most about you. But what they don't know about you is that you're also one of the founders of Hawaii Interfaith Power and Light, along with my husband. And I would like today to talk about why faith is important, why faith communities find that climate change and sustainability is important, but also to talk about indigenous communities and their spiritual perspectives on climate change. And then we'll talk about Hawaii Interfaith Power and Light and the tremendous work that you are doing with not just Christian churches, but all of the faith community in Hawaii. So Chuck, can you comment a little bit about why climate change is important to faith communities?
Well, I would like not only to include climate change, because it's just one segment or part of caring for the creation. It's creation overall that's very, very important. And of course, it also pertains very closely to the faith traditions of all religions. Because by faith, it means changing one's behavior according to your religious perspective and doctrines and so forth. So if there's any changes that can come about in caring for the creation, in dealing with climate change, it should come from that faith perspective. Now, it not only pertains to religious groups, interfaith groups, but also the secular groups as well. Even the atheists also have a faith perspective. So it's important is to get to that inner part of you that would cause you to change your living behaviors.
So you don't think it's just the facts and figures of how it affects our quality of life that makes people act, but it's also their moral underpinnings, their value system? What are some of those values within the Christian faith that call us to care for the climate, for land, for water, for all of the resources we talk about when we're referring to the effects of climate change and sustainability?
I've been a member of the Protestant religious faith for many years, growing up in the Hawaiian church community, and that has always been part of my life. However, it wasn't until, probably in the 70s and 80s and so forth, when I realized that the caring creation is a Judeo-Christian theological belief and doctrine. And it goes back to Genesis about as the Lord commanded Adam and Eve to tend to the garden in quotes, not necessarily a vegetable garden to feed themselves, but the garden as it applies to their surroundings where they lived and grew up. And to us, it is the global earth surroundings as well. So it's a large garden. And tending to the garden, it doesn't mean, just to farm, to harvest, not only the vegetable food products, but the hunting and gathering that took place at that time, and the agricultural enterprises that took place after that. But it's also to care for all other forms of life on earth.
Indeed, one of the things that my husband, Reverend David Turner, your good friend, has often preached, and I always remember this, is the translation that we have become accustomed to over the centuries of caring for that garden has been to till it and to have dominion over it. And whereas he always explains that when you go back to the Hebrew translation, the words are actually, I believe, Shema and Abad. And I apologize to those Hebrew linguists out there that I've butchered the words, but Shema and Abad are to actually serve the creation, serve the garden, and to protect it, rather than to till it and to have dominion over it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was not acquainted with the Hebrew words to share and to protect, and that's very important, because the concept of dominion has been misinterpreted especially by Christians over the generations, meaning to dominate all other life forms, in fact, all other humans, except for their own racial group, and to use the natural resources for their own particular ends, not thinking about as Pope Francis was saying, in fact, in his last message was saying that Christianity had misinterpreted dominion, and saying that in Genesis, it also means the connections between not only human beings, but human beings with all life forms.
That's right.
And this connection goes back to the ecological principles of the web of life, that all life are connected.
And it's interesting because I looked up on the Hawaii Interfaith Power and Light website and found actually a whole listing of wonderful quotes from Buddhism, from Hinduism, from Islam, as well as the Hebrew Bible and the Christian New Testament. And there's some wonderful quotes here that speak exactly to that perspective. For example, the earth dries and withers, the world languishes and withers, the heavens languish together with the earth. The earth lies polluted under its inhabitants, for they have transgressed laws, violated the statutes, broken the everlasting covenant. That is from the Hebrew Bible, from Isaiah 24. But we have a similar statement in Buddhism, right, which is all about, I think most of the Buddhists, who we have numerous in Hawaii, understand the Buddhist perspective as non-harming, non-violence, not just towards people, but they are very inclusive of all of the creation. And that when we're harming creation, we're harming our neighbors and one another. And then you mentioned also that Hawaii Interfaith Power and Light works with the imam in town at the mosque. And what are some of the Islamic perspectives?
Well, it's interesting, because just today came on the website. The Muslims in Turkey, Istanbul, had published a video as to how the Muslim faith also cares for the creation and for climate change from their perspective there, believing that if we tend wisely for the caring of the resources, there will be food for everyone. Not only in Islamic religion, but all religions as well, and goes back to even the indigenous peoples as we all were once indigenous peoples where we originally came from out of Africa at one time. And the idea is that we depend upon the plant and the animal resources for our survival, for our food. So there always has been a thank you, a mahalo for the food that we eat and the way that it is prepared, the way that it is gathered. So this becomes the religious faith traditions, you know, of old and even to now.
And it's interesting, one of the oldest faith traditions, Hinduism, also maintains, according to your Interfaith Power and Light website, that humanity is not separate from nature and that divine is everywhere and in all things. That Hindus strive to impose no harm on any living creature. That's not unlike the Buddhist perspective either, and it's not unlike the indigenous perspectives you're discussing. One of the things that fascinates me is the relationship between all of these statements about how we're to care for creative life forces, whether they're human or they're plant, and the Native Hawaiian concept of kuleana, which is basically a responsibility to serve and care for and protect. How is your work with the Native Hawaiian community and your understanding of Native Hawaiian spiritual perspectives about sustainability influencing the work you're doing?
I've been, for years in a learning process of understanding Hawaiian conservation values, Hawaiian spirituality as it pertains to the Aina. And I would like to sort of compare the slight difference between the Judeo-Christian principles of caring for the creation and the Hawaiian indigenous and other similar Polynesian beliefs about the creation. In the Judeo-Christian concepts or principles, tending the garden or the vineyard is taking care of the Lord's, quote, Lord's vineyard. Whereas with the Hawaiian and other indigenous peoples, in fact, some of the Alaskan natives that I've worked with, the Wet'suwet'en people in Nupiat, believe that when you tend to the garden, you are caring for your own family members. That's the difference, because the Hawaiians feel that the first kalu that came into being, that died and was buried again, and the second kalu then became the ancestor to all Hawaiians there. And so there is that genealogical relationship that the plant life as well as animal life are your ancestors, your family. So when we work in a lo'i kalu, when we work in restoring the wetland ponds for our native birds and aquatic life, we are caring for our family members.
Well, that is such a beautiful concept, and I want to talk more about it when we come back from our break with Chuck Burrows, and we'll have a great discussion about Native Hawaiian perspectives on sustainability as well as other faith voices.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on ThinkTech Hawaii. Center Stage airs every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and of course you can check out our archives on YouTube or on ThinkTech Hawaii anytime you like. Why should you do that? Because this is an arts show that I believe is making a difference in lives. We talk with artists of various ilk. We talk with painters and writers, playwrights, novelists, poets, sculptors, dancers, you name it, directors, actors, of course. And we don't only talk about what people do, but we talk about how they do it. And my favorite part of the conversation, we talk about why they do it. And it's really common on this show to hear people say, wow, I didn't think about it that way. And it's very common to hear people afterwards who have seen the show say the same thing. And I hear all the time that people are inspired by the conversations that we have. So why don't you join us and be inspired too? That's Center Stage on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. We'll see you center stage.
Aloha, welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii. My name is Josh Green. I'm the host of a program called Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm a physician. I work in the emergency department on the Big Island. I also serve in the state senate, which, please don't hold that against me, doesn't detract from my television program. We speak about all the big healthcare issues in the state. We get together on Tuesdays from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we try to talk about the most important issues in healthcare. This is a terrific venue for people to learn about healthcare. There are many programs on this station. We broadcast it later, not just on the internet, but also on OC16. Thanks for joining us. Please be informed healthcare consumers.
Aloha, I'm Kili'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to ThinkTech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
Hi, this is Kirsten Baumgart Turner with Sustainable Hawaii and the ThinkTech series of informational shows, and we're talking about the voices of sustainability and faith perspectives. And particularly, I've been speaking with our guest, Chuck Burrows, our last segment about Indigenous voices and particularly Native Hawaiian perspectives on sustainability. One of the things that I think our viewers will find most interesting is what you said right before we cut to break, which was the difference of sense of relationship that Native Hawaiians have with creation, that it's part of the family. Could you talk a little bit more about how that plays out in Native Hawaiian ancient as well as current cultural practices?
Okay, but first I'd like to go back about that connection as Hawaiians have to the land, to the Aina. And when you speak to the Aina, it means all forms of life, plants, animals, and even the inanimate, the non-living as well. Because all possess the energy, the mana, universal energy, overriding, concept universally. But also, it also pertains to the genetics. Because as geneticists have discovered, through their study of the DNA and so forth, that all of the different chromosomes, etc., are similar to all forms of life.
Interesting.
Plants, animals, and animals, include humans in it, have different parts of that same genetic code. So we are all related, but we are different because our physical characteristics depends upon the arrangement of these chromosomes. So that's important. So this is what scientifically, genetically, is saying what indigenous peoples, Hawaiians, Native Americans have always been saying, that we are part of the life forms as family members. And with the Hawaiians, of course, it is not only the ancestral relationship, but also we have Yakua, which is the greater universal God, the energizing force that permeates throughout the university, throughout the universe. But for family members, they also have the aumakua, their own family relationships to a plant or an animal that has certain levels and powers of the mana.
It's interesting. I've always thought of that concept of aumakua as like a guardian angel, that it's an animal that watches over. But what you're saying is that rather than just watching over, that they are relations, that they are perhaps ancestors or brothers and sisters of the individual who they're protecting.
Yes, that's my interpretation of it. For instance, some believe that the shark is their aumakua, ancestral spirit, in some way going back in history as to how a shark may have protected an ancestral family member. In my case, my Hawaiian name is Pe'apea Makavalu. Pe'apea Makavalu. Pe'apea is the name of the native Hawaiian hoary bat.
Right.
The only terrestrial mammal that evolved in the Hawaiian Islands.
I somehow never pictured you as a hoary bat.
In fact, it was great to hear the announcement that Governor Iggy had declared the hoary bat as the native Hawaiian mammal. But also, the second part of my name is Makavalo, which means 8 eyes. 8 eyes.
Now that I believe, because you have your eyes on everything when it comes to preservation of our natural resources in Hawaii.
Yeah, so that's what the literal interpretation is, an 8-eyed, all-seeing bat, you know. And so that's quite interesting because the legends and myth stories, not only Pe'apea Makavalu being a noted Hawaiian warrior in chief, but also myths and legends about the bat throughout Polynesia. When we went to, took my students to New Zealand, Aotearoa, the students came up to me and said, "Doc, this carving is about a bat, you know? It's similar," and they call it peka peka, rather than pea pea.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, yeah, I want to buy it. So the owner came up and said, "No, this has been waiting for you."
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So it shows that relationship throughout Polynesia. So it's so that also relationship, the kinship relationship to all plants and animals is very important.
So isn't that also what so many of these faith perspectives are saying? Even though it's not as deep a familial relationship, I think people are coming around to understanding that the basis of many of these faith perspectives, including our own Judeo-Christian one, is that we have that absolutely linked relationship, and that what happens to one happens to all of us.
Right.
What happens to the air over New York, as we learned from Dr. McKenna Kaufman, whom you know well, last week, does directly impact Hawaii eventually, although we may not see it. And so we're beginning to understand, as you mentioned, from a scientific perspective, so many of the things that the world's faith and wisdom traditions understood and have been teaching for millennia.
Yes.
And what are the Native Hawaiian practices that demonstrate this for us, both in what we've uncovered from the past, but what people are reclaiming and redoing today in Hawaii? And particularly, you might want to mention your work at the marsh, because it is the state's largest wetland, and you have been working at this for 40 years.
Yeah.
So just mention a couple things that you're doing there, and particularly with Native Hawaiian groups.
Yeah, well, in this perspective with Kainui Marsh, you know, I've also worked with the Hawaiian organizations, such as the Kailua Hawaiian Civic Club, who were given the Kuleana responsibility to work with state parks and caring for Ulupo Heiau. Ulupo Heiau is one of our largest and one of the oldest Hawaiian temples on this island of Oahu. I also have worked and actually founded another Hawaiian environmental organization called Ahahui Malama Ikalotahi, that group that cares for the creation of the island.
And as it's fondly referred to as Ahahui. So,
Ahahui, yes.
for those of you who've heard of it.
Yeah, and actually, this goes back to 1994, 96, when we've been talking about it, been involved with this year.
And what is the AHA doing in the marsh? What are some specific projects?
Well, let me get back to that first there. In that, we were asked by the Nature Conservancy to help them deal with the issues of pig hunting, because pig hunters were saying it's traditional practice to hunt pigs, but yet never mind about the ecosystem, the endangered plants and animal species that need to exist. So we from Ahahui developed what we have called the Hawaiian conservation values in caring for the Aina, respecting for all the plants and animals in a way in which the environment, the Aina, could continue sustainable for years to come. So, Kauai Nui Marsh is just as an example
Right.
of a working project.
And one of the best examples, I think, in conserving that wetland is you've also opened it up to the community so that it's not just set aside as a resource for watershed protection and native species protection, but you are replacing native species. You've created beautiful trails so that people in the community can go and partake in the experience of the marsh, the native birds, the native species that you've helped save and replace, and also the ulupo heiau that you mentioned is used by Native Hawaiian practitioners so that there's an ongoing and indeed a renaissance of the practices from ancient Hawaii happening today. One of the greatest experiences of my time, my nearly 30 years in Hawaii, was attending a traditional wedding in the heiau, and it was one of the most moving experiences of why we need to protect these resources from both a cultural as well as a natural resource perspective. How is it that you think the Pope's recent climate change directive, he was actually issuing a challenge to the Catholics, but also to all faith perspectives and to people around the world in his recent, I think it's called an encyclical, which means basically a report out from the Pope that he does annually, in which he challenged all of people of faith to return to those spiritual understandings of our requirement to care for our kuleana, to protect and serve. How is that related, do you think, to what's happening in Hawaii and particularly with the interfaith Power and Light projects here in Hawaii?
Okay, the Protestant mainline religions have always been involved with the caring for the environment in resolutions that they have formed and also approved. For instance, the United Church of Christ back in 2004 and 7 had introduced a environmental, energy, and climate change proposal for their congregations to follow. So they've been involved with that. Other denominations have been involved with that. Other interfaith groups have been involved. But when Pope Francis came out publicly to declare and announce the encyclical on climate change, this was an overturning revolution. And what is encyclical was not really readily accepted by conservative political groups or even within the Roman Catholic Church.
Interesting.
So where we are coming from, outside of Roman Catholic Church, is using and supporting the Pope's encyclical so that all others would be able to understand its deeper meanings and one of changing one's Christian behavior.
Indeed, one of the things I'd like to read from the Pope's challenge is basic to what you're saying. Now this earth, he says, mistreated and abused, is lamenting, and its groans join those of all the forsaken of the world. Pope Francis invites us to listen to those groans and to respond, and he relates the climate change impacts that we all read about in our papers and see on the news on TV to the suffering of the poor and the downtrodden, and states that there's an integral relationship between how we treat climate and how we treat our Aina, as our Native Hawaiian brethren would say, and how we treat our sisters and brothers, or as the Native Hawaiians would call it, our family members. Is that going to have an impact, do you think, on socioeconomic issues in Hawaii and also wherever the Catholic Church has an impact?
Yeah, well, this is what we also term an equal justice issue principles. The church, whether it's Roman Catholic, Protestant churches, all different faith groups, have been concerned with peace issues, social issues as affects, those who were not able, to care for themselves because of the economic, political conditions. But also, now we tie the environment, the ecology, with the social issues, which we call equal justice.
That is absolutely crucial, and I want to come back to that to discuss social justice issues after we take a short break with Dr. Chuck Burrows, and we're talking about sustainability and interfaith perspectives.
Hi, Jay.
Hi, Keith.
My name's Keith Bettinger.
I knew that.
And I'm the host of ThinkTech Asia.
I knew that too.
Here on ThinkTech.
Fabulous. You got a great show going, Keith.
Thank you very much. And for our viewers out there that are interested in ThinkTech Asia, it airs every Tuesday from 4 to 4:45, and it can be accessed online at thinktech.com.
Yeah, so what kind of guests you like?
Well, we have a number of guests from academia, from practitioners of international affairs. Sometimes we have military officials. Sometimes we have public officials on the show. And our goal, we try to talk about current issues in South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Central Asia, all throughout the Asian realm in more depth than you would find in traditional mainstream
That's the
media.
difference, isn't it?
Exactly.
That you're reaching out beyond what ordinary news media would do.
Right.
That's why we like you so much.
We're trying to provide a thinking person's perspective, an intelligent perspective on what's going on, and we're both sides of the story, or even when there's more than two sides, we try to cover every angle. And I think that's one of the big benefits that we provide here at ThinkTech. Is it's a really innovative source of educational programming for the people of Hawaii.
You're great, Keith. You are a great host. You got a great show going on. I watch it every week.
Thanks very much.
Why don't you guys watch it every week too, okay?
4:45 to 4 to 4:45 every Tuesday.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on ThinkTech Hawaii. Center Stage airs every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and of course you can check out our archives on YouTube or on ThinkTech Hawaii anytime you like. Why should you do that? Because this is an arts show that I believe is making a difference in lives. We talk with artists of various ilk. We talk with painters and writers, playwrights, novelists, poets, sculptors, dancers, you name it, directors, actors, of course. And we don't only talk about what people do, but we talk about how they do it. And my favorite part of the conversation, we talk about why they do it. And it's really common on this show to hear people say, wow, I didn't think about it that way. And it's very common to hear people afterwards who have seen the show say the same thing. And I hear all the time that people are inspired by the conversations that we have. So why don't you join us and be inspired too? That's Center Stage on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. We'll see you center stage.
We're back with Dr. Chuck Burrows, who's giving us great insights into spiritual perspectives of sustainability and Hawaii Interfaith Power and Light's work we're going to discuss in a moment. But I'd like to take some tweets from viewers if they'd like to ask you questions. I want to, as we're waiting for those tweets, get back to where we left off, which was your discussion of eco-justice issues. And what is your understanding of what that means for today's climate change challenges? Can you comment a little more?
I say for years, the various faith groups have been concerned with social justice, peace issues, and environmental issues. In fact, came into force in the 1970s and 80s was environmental justice. The impacts of communities, mainly minority communities, black communities, Mexican communities, and so forth, on the effects of coal plants in their neighborhood, effects of oil refineries, polluting the waters, polluting the air, and so forth. And they were the ones first to suffer. So this is where environmental justice or injustice comes into play. However, with equal justice, it takes in consideration not only the environmental impacts on marginalized people, poor people, minority groups that live in these areas, but also the ecological concepts of not only people being involved, but all forms of life. And this goes back to, once again, the theological principles and the principles of all faith groups that talk about every living creature is sacred and is important to life. However, we do have and have been exploiting the natural resources for thousands of years. We have come to the realization that these resources are being fast depleted, and we need to do something about it.
And it actually supports many scientists' teachings that we all learned from kindergarten, which is, that we're all interconnected and related, and that the food chain is important.
Yes.
And if you remove one, even the lion, the king of the food chain, that it impacts everyone else down the line.
Right.
So again, we're coming full cycle
Yes.
from our 20th century Western understandings of the scientific relationships to that now that science is supporting the spiritual and traditional native understandings of the interconnectedness of all forms of life. It's a brilliant and a beautiful coming together. I think we're at an important nexus in humanity. And I think the Pope points this out, exactly what you're talking about in caring for one another within an eco-justice perspective. He invites us to listen to those groans of the earth, but also the poorest people who are most impacted by climate change. And he says that we're invited to an ecological conversion. And actually, previous Pope said that. He said that was an expression of St. Paul II.
Yes.
And that we're invited to change direction by taking on the beauty and responsibility of caring for our common home. And that understanding of a common home is certainly an indigenous belief that we've understood from our Native American and our Native Hawaiian brethren.
This is what has been the criticism against the Pope in announcing the encyclical by saying that he should stick to the moral, theological concerns rather than slipping into climate change and other environmental concerns. And the thing is that these people don't quite understand. This is exactly what Pope Francis is doing is addressing the moral and spiritual concerns. And this is where all of us, throughout the world need to support the Pope. And so this coming September 1st, Pope Francis has declared September 1st to be an annual caring for the creation in prayer and in action. And he taken his clue from the Archbishop Bartholomew of the Christian Unorthodox Church. Has been doing this for many years. So if we all would be able, to participate in some way, for instance, the Church of the Crossroads on September 1st from 11:30 to 12:30 is inviting other faith groups such as the Muslim group, the Buddhists as well, the Jewish, and other Christians, as well as Catholics, to join with us in prayer and sharing with each other what we are doing here in Hawaii, as well as globally, in caring for the creation.
And can people find out about that on the website for Hawaii Faith?
On Hawaii Interfaith Power and Light, plus we'll have an announcement probably in the Star Advertiser on the Saturday, the Pat G's column as well.
Terrific. Well, one of the things that I found uplifting is it's not just doom and gloom. In everything that you do, we see that because you provide tremendous opportunities for people to interact and participate in solutions at the Marsh and through your teaching. But the Pope also provides a ray of hope, and he stated, humanity still has the ability to work together in building our common home. Men and women are still capable of intervening positively. Human beings, while capable of the worst, are also capable of rising above themselves, choosing again what is good, and making a new start. That is exactly what the churches and faith communities in Hawaii are doing with Hawaii Interfaith Power and Light. I think it was started about 15 years ago by a
2000, yeah,
priest,
right.
Sally
Bingham.
I remember her coming to Hawaii and speaking to folks and the chapter getting started here. Can you tell us a little bit more? I know you mentioned the prayer meeting, but is there not also a march that's happening all over the United States in September?
Yep.
And what is that march about?
Yeah. Well, getting back to the Interfaith Power and Light, I first became acquainted with this organization when I attended a National Council of Churches convention in Seattle, Washington. And I thought the Interfaith Power and Light was an electrical company, much to this, was quite different. Interfaith.
So what is it doing exactly? Why is it called Power and Light?
Interfaith meaning not only the Christian, but all other religious groups. Power, the power of God, and then light is knowledge as well.
But is it not also helping churches to convert to renewable resources and to implement energy efficiency?
Yeah.
What are some of those?
Yeah. So the Interfaith Power and Light is dealing with environment, particularly climate change, from a religious perspective. That's very important because things have been going on for many years by secular groups, environmental groups, dealing with protecting, saving the earth. But coming from the religious perspective is very, very important, which, we say the United States has a large majority of practicing Christians. And if we have many Christians here in the United States, think what they could do if their life changes in their consuming habits, and reducing the fossil fuels.
So one of the things I know that the churches have been working on within your group is helping churches to establish green teams and getting each church to be more energy efficient, and also helping to raise funds and exchange information about what are the opportunities for the church organization and the buildings themselves to be models of better stewardship of their resources.
Yes, so we've been encouraging church congregations therefore to reduce their electrical uses, by getting more energy efficient appliances, resources, but there is a program now out called the GEMS program, sponsored by the state and Panasonic, to get nonprofit churches to be able to install solar photovoltaic panels using the sun's energy. And the Church of Crossroads is going through this process right now. And so I would encourage other congregations, wherever they are, if they're interested in this project for their churches, to give us a call. Because one of the deadlines is that by 2016, the federal grants will be no more. So it's taking advantage of this for now.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Dr. Burrows has been illuminating, excuse the pun, us on the faith perspectives of sustainability. And he's also a great example of actual in-the-ground implementation of sustainability principles and what we can do about it. I'd like to ask our listeners to go to the website of Hawaii Interfaith Power and Light. It's hipl.org to find out more about what's happening within the interfaith community and how you can get involved. Thank you.